Good morning, and it is chapter 21 of Mosiah, and we have left the people in bondage. You might say they had a fight with the Nephite, the Lamanites, sorry, um, and because the wicked priests had taken the daughters of the Lamanites, and they're back to peace, it looks like. And it came to pass that Limhi and his people returned to the city of Nephi and began to dwell in the land again in peace. So say they, they're still under bondage. And it came to pass after many days, the Lamanites began to be stirred up in anger against the Nephites, and they began to come into the borders of the land round about. Now they durst not slay them, because of the oath which their king had made unto Limhi, but they would smite them on the cheeks and exercise authority over them, began to put heavy burdens on their backs, and drive them as they would a dumb ass. Yea, and all this was done that the word of the Lord might be fulfilled. So here we're seeing the prophecies of Abinadi being fulfilled in a lot. And so they got a lot of afflictions here. They've lost hope, basically. They were surrounded by the Lamanites, so they couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't do anything. And they began to murmur with the king. I think it's interesting it says with the king, because of their afflictions. And they began to be desirous to go against them in battle. So after all this murmuring and complaints, then he says, well, let's gather together and we'll do that then. And they go to battle, they get beaten, and a lot of men die there. And now, because of the mourning and the lamentation of the widows, and the children, they decide to go against them again, and and they get driven back, and then 3 times they do this, and they're driven back. You think that they'd learn the first time, but they didn't. And they got to the point where they did humble themselves. Here we go in verse 13. After 3 times they did humble themselves even to the dust, subjecting themselves to the yoke of bondage, submitting themselves to be smitten and be driven to and fro, and burdened according to the desires of their enemies. And they did humble themselves even to the depths of humility, and they did cry mightily to God, even all the day did they cry unto their God that he would deliver them out of their afflictions. Now, it's interesting here. This is when they're reaching out to God. After they've decided to try to take it on themselves, after all this is when they start. So, they'd gone to war 4 times. Don't forget that when the Lamanite army came in after the daughters of the Lamanites were stolen, and they've been afflicted. They're just really battered down, and now they come in the depths of humility and cried unto the Lord. And now the Lord was slow to hear their cry because of their iniquities. Nevertheless, the Lord did hear their cries and began to soften the hearts of the Lamanites. I love to just read this and just understand what is happening here. We're going to start seeing small mercies towards them, and they began to ease their burdens, yet the Lord did not see fit to deliver them out of bondage. So sometimes we do still have to go through some really hard things, but if you look for the tender mercies, the things that the Lord is doing, like softening the hearts of your enemies, that is those small mercies. And it came to pass that they began to prosper by degrees in the land, and began to raise grain more abundantly, and flocks and herds, that they did not suffer with hunger. And I think at this point they probably had been suffering with hunger. I kind of picture it as, just think, if you get one slice of bread, and because that's all you could get, and from that slice of bread you have to cut it in half and give half of it to the Lamanites, and so you only have half a slice of bread to live off until the next time you can get a slice of bread. But when you go to bite it, you find out that there's already been a big bite taken out of it, so you don't even have half a slice of bread. And that's sort of, well, we'll see with the priests of Noah had stolen a lot of their grain anyway. Now, there was a great number of women, more than there was of men. Therefore the king commanded that every man should impart to the support of the widows and their children, that they might not perish with hunger. And this they did, because of the greatness of their number that had been slain. Now the people of Limhi kept together in a body as much as possible, and secured their grain, and the king himself did not trust his person without the walls of the city, unless he took his guards, that he might by some means fall into the hands of the Lamanites. And he caused his people should watch the land round about, that by some means they might take those priests that fled in the wilderness, who had stolen the daughters of the Lamanites, and had caused such great destruction to come upon them. They really understand what those priests were doing now, for they were desirous to take upon them that they might punish them, for they had come into the land of Nephi by night, and carried off their grain and many of their precious things. Therefore they laid wait for them. And it came to pass there is no more disturbance between the Lamanites and the people of Limhi, even until Ammon came. And then Ammon was discovered, and they thought that they were priests, the priests of Noah, and they would have been put to death if they were. And when he found out that they came from the land of Zarahemla, he was filled with exceeding great joy. And then it talks that Limhi had sent a small number of men to search the land, and found the place that had dry bones, and had that record. But it's interesting that it was only days before the coming of Ammon, so I kind of feel like here Limhi was devastated, thinking that was our only chance, and it's gone. And for a few days he was just like, I don't know what we can do, how we're going to go on. And then Ammon shows up. Could you imagine the feel? It's like, oh yes, that's great. And also the fact that they found that record, because it was told to them that if they did not repent, that a record would be left of them as a people. And so to see a record of a people that was destroyed probably really hit close to home with them. And then finding out that this record could be translated by Mosiah again filled them with joy. And so then Ammon and everybody mourned for the death of everybody, I guess, and mourned that Alma had left and that the Church of God was not not there anymore. So Alma had formed the Church of God through the strength and power of God. And I'm pretty sure they know a little bit about that. There's probably people who had secretly gone there but had not made it for the last little bit. And now I find this interesting. They did mourn for their departure, for they knew not whither they had gone. Now they would have gladly joined them, for they themselves had entered into a covenant to God to serve him and keep his commandments. Now notice that. They themselves had entered into a covenant. This is some of the people. And now since the coming of Ammon, King Limhi also entered into a covenant with God, and also many of his people to serve him and keep his commandments. See the difference. There was some that entered in early to covenant with God to keep his commandments, and then there was some that at the coming of Ammon, as soon as they had that hope, also felt that they should enter into a covenant and keep his commandments. I put a note here, 2017 actually was when I wrote this. Some covenanted during their trials, and others, including King Limhi, covenanted after they saw the possibility of deliverance. So sometimes you teach, how did it do that? Sometimes you teach the people the possibility of deliverance through Jesus Christ, and as they do that, then they can repent. Sometimes they don't see how they can ever get out, and if we don't teach that, they may not know. Other people will join regardless, but for them it took that possibility of deliverance. And it came to pass that King Limhi and many of his people were desirous to be baptized, but there was none with the authority from God. And so then we'll see. They did not join the church at that time or make themselves into a church, waiting upon the Spirit of the Lord. I love that. Waiting upon the Spirit of the Lord. For they were desirous, even as Alma and his brethren who had fled into the wilderness, and they are desirous to be baptized as a witness and a testimony that they were willing to serve God with all their hearts. Nevertheless, they did prolong the time, and their baptism will be given hereafter. And that all the study of Ammon and his brethren and King Limhi and his people was to deliver themselves out of the hands of the Lamanites and from bondage. And I wonder how they'll do that and who will come up with the solution. We'll find out tomorrow. So I hope you have a good day, and we will